A text to a stranger saved her. He was a mafia boss, and he arrived before the police. The rain hit the glass like small fists, fast, relentless. The lights in Kira's apartment were off, not because she forgot to pay, but because she didn't dare turn them on. Shadows moved when he got mad, and Darren was mad tonight. She pressed her back into the corner of the kitchen, the cold tile soaking through her thin top. Her lip was still bleeding from where his ring caught it. Her hand shook as it hovered over the base of a fake aloe plant by the fridge. That's where she'd hidden the burner. Her breath fogged the air in quick bursts. The footsteps had stopped. For now. Kira gripped the cheap plastic phone like it was a weapon. Her thumbs slid across the screen, unlocking it. One old text sat there, unread. From months ago. A wrong number. She had no one else. Her fingers moved faster than her brain. Please help. He's hurting me. 415 Wexler Street. Top floor. Don't call. Just come. She hit send and held her breath. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. That's when her whisper came, dry, shaking, but alive. Please, I don't know who you are, but I need help. He's going to kill me. The burner phone went still. No reply. Not even a delivered icon. Her chest caved with silence. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it. Behind her, a drawer opened. She froze. Darren was getting something, or looking for what she had taken. Either way, she knew she didn't have much time. Kira crawled on her knees to the far wall, pulling her blanket from the floor and wrapping it around her shaking shoulders. She didn't cry. She'd cried before. It changed nothing. Tonight, she needed something different. Outside, thunder cracked. A car engine hummed just beneath the sound. It wasn't the police. It wasn't a neighbor. It was a black town car with tinted windows. And the man inside didn't blink when the wipers cleared the fog. He had the address and her message. He opened the car door and stepped into the rain. Renzo Calderi never looked at his phone when it buzzed the first time. He was reviewing doc reports at his apartment's glass table. Silent, sterile, untouched but for his espresso and the Beretta laid beside it. When it buzzed again, he checked. Not many people had this number. Fewer dared use it. Unknown sender. The message was short. Please help. He's hurting me. 415 Wexler Street. Top floor. Don't call. Just come. His eyes didn't flinch. He didn't reply. Didn't need to. Renzo turned the phone in his palm once, then pressed a button beneath the table's surface. Across the city, a black car engine started. 2 more messages came in, one repeat, one nearly unreadable from shaky fingers. No one used that number for months. It had been a one-time burner, used by one of his men during a warehouse reroute. Someone had clearly saved it. And just as clearly, someone was desperate enough to try. He checked the address. His jaw ticked once. Wexler Street, a block from where his brother used to live. Same district the Cabrelli family had tried to push him out of years ago. He didn't ask why the woman texted. He didn't need the story. He stood, buttoned his black coat, and picked up the Beretta. By the time the elevator hit the ground floor, his driver was waiting. You got something? The man asked. Top floor. 415 Wexler, Renzo said, sliding into the back seat. You want the crew? No sirens. Just me. Copy that. Rain smeared the city lights into long stripes across the windshield. Renzo stared out into the dark, his fingers resting on the butt of the weapon in his coat pocket. He didn't blink once on the ride over. Across town, in a silent apartment, Kira crouched in the dark, the burner phone pressed against her chest like a second heartbeat. She didn't know if her message reached anyone. She didn't know the man in the car was already there. But she would, in exactly 4 minutes. Wexler Street was quiet but not asleep. The black town car coasted into the block with its lights off. It stopped in front of a pale brick building with rusted balconies and cracked mailboxes. A neon sign across the street blinked in tired rhythm. The back door of the car opened before the engine even stopped. Renzo stepped out, 6'3", dark overcoat, close-cropped hair still damp from the ride. A jagged scar peeked from under his jawline, but his eyes, cold, flat, stayed locked on the building. No hesitation, no curiosity, just purpose. He didn't check the address again. He didn't knock. He walked straight up the stairs, boots silent on old concrete, a weight in his coat shifting with each step. From behind a second-floor window, a neighbor peeked through the blinds, saw his face, and quickly shut them. Renzo reached the top floor in under 40 seconds. Kira didn't hear him yet. She was still pressed into the far corner of the apartment, blanket wrapped around her like armor, breathing in stutters. The burner phone had gone dark in her hand. Down the hall, Renzo stopped outside her door. The wood was swollen from age. The hinges rusted. Inside, Darren was muttering again. "Kira, you better not be hiding anything. I swear if I find one more thing that don't add up." He slammed something on the counter. Kira flinched. Another step. Closer. She didn't hear it at first. Not over Darren's pacing, not over her own heartbeat. But then she heard it. A knock. It wasn't frantic. It wasn't loud. Just deliberate. Her body stiffened. Darren froze. They both stared at the door like it had spoken. The voice that followed was low, firm, and male. "Kira Vale?" She didn't move. Darren did. He started toward the door with rage already climbing up his neck. But he never reached it. Because the second his hand touched the knob, the door shattered open. And the man on the other side didn't wait for permission. The door split against the frame like it had been waiting for that moment. Wood hit the floor in sharp pieces. Darren stumbled back, arms flying up in shock. Kira sucked in a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Renzo stepped over the broken door as if it were nothing but dust. No badge, no uniform, no warning. Just a tall man in a dark suit with rain still dripping from his collar, and a look that emptied the room of sound. He didn't say who he was. He didn't ask what happened. His eyes went to Kira first, wide, shaking, blanket falling off one shoulder, then shifted to Darren like he already knew his name. Darren tried to square his stance. "Who the hell are you?" he snapped. Renzo didn't answer. He moved. One stride. Two. Then his hand locked around Darren's throat with clean, unbroken force. Darren's feet lifted off the floor for half a second before Renzo slammed him into the wall hard enough to rattle the kitchen shelves. A jar fell and cracked open on the ground. Kira pressed a hand to her mouth. Renzo didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You're done." Darren struggled, swinging his arms, but Renzo's grip didn't loosen. His face stayed calm, almost bored, as he pinned Darren with one arm and reached into his coat with the other. Kira thought he was pulling a weapon. He wasn't. He pulled zip ties. He tossed them behind him without looking. Two men stepped in from the hallway, men she hadn't even seen behind him, dressed in black, faces steady, movements sharp. They grabbed Darren by the arms and forced him to the ground. Kira crawled back, pressing her spine into the corner. Renzo turned toward her slowly. His coat shifted, revealing the outline of a gun, but he didn't reach for it. He took off the coat instead and set it near her feet. "Put this on," he said softly. Kira stared at him, chest tight, breath shaky. She waited for anger, for a threat, for a demand. Instead, he looked at her with steady focus. "You're safe now," he said. Then he glanced at the broken door. No more words tonight. The hallway was silent after the impact. Only the soft tap of rain slid through the broken frame as Renzo stood in the doorway, watching Darren try to breathe under the weight of the men holding him down. Kira pulled his coat around her shoulders, the fabric heavy, warm, smelling faintly of clean cologne and the wet night outside. Her hands trembled, but for the first time all night, the shaking slowed. Renzo didn't stay still long. He crouched to Kira's level, keeping a distance, letting her see his movements before he made them. His voice stayed even. "You're leaving with me." Kira looked from him to Darren, who was still pinned on the floor, wrists secured behind him. Darren growled through his teeth. "She's not going anywhere with—" Renzo didn't let him finish. He placed one boot on Darren's shoulder, pressing just enough to silence him. He didn't look at Darren while he did it. His attention stayed on Kira. "You don't open that door again. You don't look back. Understand?" Kira nodded once. Renzo stood and motioned to his men. They dragged Darren toward the hallway, his shoes scraping against the wood. Kira rose slowly, her legs unsteady. Renzo reached out a hand, stopping short of touching her, waiting for permission. She hesitated, then placed her palm in his. His grip was firm but careful, guiding her past the broken frame. The hallway lights flickered above them. "Is he going to jail?" she whispered. Renzo didn't break stride. "He'll be handled." The elevator dinged at the end of the hall, the doors sliding open like they had been waiting only for him. His men shoved Darren in first. Renzo stepped inside after them, keeping Kira at his side, shielding her from view. As the doors closed, Darren's voice snapped through the space. "You don't know who you're messing with. You think you're taking her? You're dead, man." Renzo didn't turn his head. He didn't blink. He only said one thing. "No. You are." The elevator sealed shut, and the building fell quiet. Halfway down the descent, the elevator lights cut out. A hard jolt shook the floor. Kira gasped and grabbed Renzo's arm. In the dark, a single red emergency bulb flickered on, enough to show Darren's eyes widening behind the men holding him. Something had triggered the system. Someone else knew they were on the move. And they weren't alone in the building. If this opening has you holding your breath, hit like and subscribe to our channel Tales of Mafia Lovers. Things are just getting started. Darren's jaw cracked as his face slammed into the floorboards. Renzo didn't give him time to scream. One hand pinned his arm at a savage angle, while his knee drove into Darren's spine, flattening him with the kind of pressure that said, "Stay down or stop breathing." The living room was chaos now. Glass on the floor, door hanging by a single hinge, rain still tapping from the broken frame. But Renzo was calm. Calm like people who've ended worse men in quieter places. Darren twisted under him, shouting threats into the rug. Renzo pressed harder. "Say another word," he warned. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Darren shut up. Kira sat frozen on the far side of the room. Coat still clutched around her, blood dried on her lower lip. Her eyes weren't on Darren. They were locked on the man above him, this stranger who moved like violence and spoke like control. Renzo pulled a plastic tie from his coat and looped it around Darren's wrists. Then another for his ankles. Still silent. Still efficient. The two men who followed him in hovered behind the broken door, checking for movement in the hallway. One of them gave a subtle nod. All clear. Renzo stood, eyes never leaving Darren. He adjusted the sleeves of his coat, rolled his shoulders once, and let out a breath that barely made a sound. He glanced at Kira next. Not rushed, not pushing. Her hand shook as she held the edge of his jacket. She didn't speak. Neither did he. Instead, Renzo walked toward her, knelt down and extended a cloth from his inner pocket. Kira hesitated, then slowly took it, pressing it to the cut on her lip. "You're safe now," Renzo said, low and firm. "No more words tonight." He stood and nodded toward his men. One lifted Darren from the floor, the other stepped ahead into the hall. Rain splashed through the entrance like it hadn't stopped since her first text. Renzo looked at Kira one more time, then turned toward the door. The hallway outside smelled of wet concrete and rusted wiring. Old water stains marked the ceiling, and a flickering light above. The stairs blinked just enough to make everything feel off balance. Renzo walked ahead of the group. No questions, no pauses. Behind him, Darren was barely standing. One of Renzo's men held him upright by the collar, while the other gripped his bound arms. His nose was bleeding, and his mouth wouldn't stay shut. "I'll make a call," Darren muttered. "Y'all don't know who I work with. I got people." Renzo stopped, turned around. He didn't speak. He only looked. Darren's voice broke off mid-sentence. His mouth closed. The elevator at the end of the hall dinged softly as it opened. They stepped in. Kira moved last, still wrapped in the coat, her bare feet silent on the floor. She didn't ask where they were going. She didn't even look at Darren as he stood breathing hard in the corner, bruises already forming. Renzo stood at her side, slightly in front. A shield without announcement. The ride down felt longer than it was. Kira stared at her reflection in the elevator wall. Her lip was swollen. Her cheek bore the faint shape of Darren's last outburst. But her eyes looked different now, like something had cracked but hadn't shattered. Outside, the black car was waiting. Renzo opened the back door himself and stepped aside. Kira hesitated before getting in. Her hand brushed the edge of his coat again. Then she climbed in quietly. Renzo followed. The men shoved Darren into another car parked at the corner. Rain smeared across the window as the driver pulled into traffic. Renzo said nothing. Neither did she. The silence wasn't awkward. It was weight. It was everything she'd been holding in now, pressing down with nowhere left to run. Her hands stayed clenched in her lap, her breathing uneven. But this time, it wasn't from fear of Darren. It was the unknown sitting next to her, calm as night, not saying a word, and still making her feel safer than anyone ever had. The car moved through the city with steady speed, gliding past streetlights and closed storefronts. Water streaked across the window beside Kira, blurring everything outside into soft lines. The heater blew warm air, but she still felt cold inside, as if her body hadn't. It caught up with the fact that Darren was no longer inches from her face. Kira sat rigid, hands tight around the coat on her lap. She didn't dare speak. Every time she opened her mouth at home, it led to shouting, broken dishes, or bruises she learned to cover with makeup. Silence felt safer now. Renzo leaned back in his seat, studying her from the side. His gaze wasn't harsh. It wasn't impatient. It was steady, like he was trying to understand how a woman this quiet ended up needing help from a stranger's burner phone. Her fingers twitched against the fabric. He noticed. He reached into his inner pocket again and pulled out a fresh cloth packet. Instead of handing it over this time, he lightly tapped her elbow to get her attention. The gesture was small but careful, giving her time to decide if she wanted to turn. Kira looked at him, just for a second. Renzo placed the packet in her hand. Then he spoke. "You're safe now. No rush, no push, no threats." He said it like he meant it, like it was a fact, not comfort. She swallowed, throat tight. He added, "No more words tonight." It wasn't dismissal. It was permission. She didn't have to explain what happened, didn't have to defend herself, didn't have to apologize for bleeding on her own shirt. Renzo then shifted his attention to the front. "Head to South Rainier," he told the driver. South Rainier wasn't near her home. It wasn't near anything she recognized. But she didn't ask where that was. She simply pressed the cloth to her lip again, the sting reminding her she was still here, still breathing. She stared at the city outside as they drove. Her heartbeat slowed for the first time since she texted that message. Renzo didn't watch her anymore. But he didn't look away from her reflection in the window either. The drive to South Rainier took 13 minutes. The car rolled past the edge of the business district, turning down quieter. Streets where the pavement was smooth and the streetlights shined evenly. Kira didn't recognize the neighborhood. The buildings were cleaner, the air calmer. The chaos she'd just left felt miles behind, even though it wasn't. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The heat inside the car stayed steady. The silence between them wasn't cold. It was permission. Permission to breathe without explaining herself. When they turned into a gated lot, her shoulders tensed again. Renzo noticed. He lifted one hand, not to touch her, but to point. "No one here knows your name," he said. The gate opened on its own. Motion sensors. The car pulled into an underground space and stopped beside a private elevator. Renzo got out first. Kira hesitated. Her fingers clutched the edge of the coat again. He waited without pressure, just standing near the door until she stepped out on her own. Inside the elevator, soft light filled the space. She stood against the wall, watching the floor count blink. When the doors opened, they stepped into a penthouse that didn't feel like the kind of place someone showed off. No gold, no mirrors. Just clean wood floors, white walls, and large windows framing the rain outside. Kira scanned the space like she was still expecting cameras. Renzo set down his keys on a glass tray and disappeared into another room without a word. 2 minutes later, a soft knock came from the hallway. Kira stiffened. Renzo returned and opened the door for a woman with kind eyes and quiet shoes. No clipboard. No uniform. She didn't introduce herself with a title. She only said, "Hi, Kira. I'm here to help you rest." That's all. Kira didn't move. The woman added, You don't have to speak. Kira nodded once. That was all she could do. Then she walked to the bedroom, Renzo's coat still wrapped around her, and sat down on the edge of the bed without looking anyone in the eye. The room stayed quiet, but the silence wasn't empty anymore. Hours passed. The rain kept falling outside, softer now, like it had run out of rage. Inside the apartment, the lights stayed dim. The trauma specialist remained for some time, never forcing words, never touching Kira unless invited. She simply sat in the corner chair, writing nothing, saying little. At one point, Kira leaned against the headboard and let herself breathe for more than 3 seconds without flinching. Her eyes stayed on the door. Renzo hadn't left the hallway. He hadn't moved. He leaned against the wall, arms folded, one foot pressed back into the baseboard. He hadn't smoked, hadn't scrolled his phone, hadn't looked bored. He was waiting, not for drama, for stillness. The specialist eventually walked out, gave Renzo a quiet nod, and left without a word. He remained there. Kira peeked once, just once, from under the blanket. Still him, still there. By the time the clock hit 3:12 a.m., she fell asleep. Real sleep, not the kind that ends every 10 minutes in gasps. Renzo pushed off the wall and walked down the hall to the room he hadn't touched in weeks. He closed the door, sat at the desk, and pulled out a second phone from the drawer. He scrolled to one name, tapped it. A voice answered after 2 rings. "Yeah, boss?" Renzo leaned back in the chair. "I need you to pull everything off a man named Darren Ruse. Every file, every phone call, emails, transactions, all of it. Understood? I want the laptop scrubbed, everything. Whatever you find, send it. I don't care how deep you have to go." The voice on the other end hesitated. Is this cleanup or exposure? Renzo's jaw tightened. Exposure, with full detail, delivered to the right people. And I want it to hit before sunrise. He ended the call. Then he opened his drawer again and stared at something wrapped in an old cloth, his brother's watch. He hadn't touched it in years. He unwrapped it slowly and set it on the table beside the phone. The phone buzzed once more. A message from his tech man. "You're going to want to see what was on that hard drive." Sunlight leaked through sheer curtains, soft and slow. Kira opened her eyes to stillness. No yelling, no creaking floorboards, no angry footsteps outside her door. Just the hum of distant wind against thick glass. The sheets under her were smooth, tucked too precisely to be hers. The walls were plain white, not sterile, not cold, just untouched. She blinked twice. There were no blinking lights, no hidden lenses in the corners, no wires hanging near the vent. Her body stayed tense, but her mind started cataloging the differences without meaning to. There was no lock on the inside of the door, but no deadbolt on the outside either. Kira sat up slowly. Her ankle wasn't bruised today. A folded blanket rested at the foot of the bed. A small tray on the side table held a glass of water, a soft white towel, and a sealed toothbrush. She touched none of it. The room was too quiet, too clean. Her body remembered what fear felt like, even when the fear itself wasn't present. She slid out of bed, bare feet pressing into a plush rug. The floor didn't creak beneath her. She made her way to the door and pushed it open, half expecting someone to stop her. No one did. The hallway beyond was wide, painted a pale gray. Framed photographs lined the walls. Landscapes, not people. A woman stood in the kitchen at the far end, stirring something gently in a small pot. She didn't look up when Kira appeared. She just nodded at a stool pulled out beside the island counter. "Morning," the woman said, voice calm. Kira stepped closer. "I made you something warm," the woman added, pouring soup into a bowl. "You don't have to eat. Just sit." Kira sat, hands on her knees. The soup smelled like something her grandmother used to make, but her stomach stayed closed. The woman didn't push. She only placed the bowl in front of her and left the room without another word. Kira stared at the steam curling upward. This was the first morning in a long time where she didn't feel watched. And somehow that felt even stranger than being followed. The soup stayed untouched. Kira wrapped her hands around the bowl, more for the warmth than anything else. The quiet pressed in, not heavy, just full. No television humming in the background. No phone buzzing. No one asking her to explain herself. She listened. There were faint footsteps above, probably another room, water running through pipes, and a low, slow creak from the front door, closing gently. She stood and followed the sound. The house opened up into a large living space, simple but expensive. Wooden floors, clean-lined furniture, long windows looking out over the tree-lined drive. No decorations, no clutter. Everything was placed like it belonged. She walked to the far window, lifting the edge of the curtain. That's when she saw him. Renzo stood outside near the front path. He wasn't pacing or speaking into a phone. He wasn't armed or tense. He was just standing. One hand rested inside his coat, the other tucked into his pocket. His head tilted down slightly as if he was listening to the street itself. He hadn't seen her, but even at that distance, he felt present. Like he wasn't just watching the driveway. He was holding something off. She let the curtain fall and leaned against the wall. This man didn't act like the men she'd known before. He hadn't asked for thanks, hadn't boasted, hadn't smiled once. Even in the car, his silence hadn't felt cold. It felt chosen. Kira walked back toward the kitchen and sat down again. The soup had cooled. Still untouched. A folder lay on the edge of the island. She hadn't noticed it earlier. Plain, closed, nothing written on the front. She didn't reach for it. Not yet. Her eyes drifted to the hallway. Still quiet. Still alone. She looked back outside. Renzo hadn't moved. He was still there. Still listening. Still keeping her out of whatever danger she hadn't fully escaped yet. The front door clicked open, slow and smooth. Kira turned as Renzo stepped back inside. His coat was damp from standing outside. He took it off, hung it on a hook by the door, and didn't say a word. She watched him cross the living room with the quiet confidence of someone who didn't need to announce himself to anyone. Not even her. He passed her on the way to the kitchen, nodded once toward the soup still sitting, cold on the counter, then opened the fridge and pulled out a bottle of water. Kira hadn't spoken to anyone since last night. The words in her throat felt like stones. She didn't know where to start, what to say, or even if she should say anything. But the question had been burning since he broke through her door. She looked up from the bowl, her voice hoarse. "Who are you?" Renzo twisted the cap off the bottle, but didn't drink. He met her gaze. For a second he didn't respond, just studied her face, like he was deciding how much to say or maybe what kind of truth she could carry. Finally he answered. "A man who doesn't like women screaming in fear." He said it plainly, no smile, no echo, just the truth, dropped like a stone in water. Kira blinked. That wasn't the answer she expected. He set the water down beside her, then leaned his hands on the counter, posture relaxed but ready. "You're not here as a favor," he added. "You're here because you needed to be out, and I don't need a reason to fix that." Kira swallowed. Her throat still burned from the night before. Renzo didn't speak again. He walked past her, back into the hallway, giving her space without retreating. She turned to watch him go. There were no guards posted, no locks turned, no one forcing her to stay. But for some reason, she didn't want to leave. Not yet, not without knowing more about the man who showed up when no one else did. The quiet stretched again after Renzo disappeared down the hallway. Kira remained at the kitchen island, hands resting on the edge of the stool. Her legs ached from stillness, but she didn't move. Her eyes shifted back to the folder. Only now, it wasn't a folder. It was a laptop. Thin, closed, matte black. A single cord ran from its side to an outlet beneath the counter. The screen was still warm. It had been used recently. She reached for it slowly, fingers brushing the lid before she lifted it. The login screen was already bypassed. No password needed. No files hidden. It opened straight to a desktop with one folder in the center. Darren, primary. She stared at the name like it might jump off the screen. Kira's thumb hovered over the trackpad. She didn't know what she expected to find. Maybe messages, maybe images, but she clicked. The folder opened. Inside were subfolders with labels that made her pulse quicken. Surveillance. Bank logs, voice memos, client transactions, hidden assets. She clicked surveillance first. A series of video thumbnails loaded. Each was dated. Each file listed the room, living room, kitchen, bedroom, bathroom. Her breath hitched. She clicked one, kitchen 4/22/21. The screen filled with grainy footage of her walking into the kitchen in slippers, opening the fridge, grabbing a bottle of water. Alone. Barely awake. No sound. She remembered that morning. She just had a nightmare. Darren wasn't home. She thought she had peace. She hadn't. Her chest tightened. She clicked voice memos next. One played on auto. Darren's voice filled the air. She thinks she's smart. Thinks I don't see it. But she'll stay. She always stays. Kira slammed the laptop shut. Her hands were shaking again. But not from fear. From fury. She looked toward the hallway where Renzo had gone. The man had said nothing. Just left the laptop out for her, like a truth waiting to be seen. He hadn't forced her to look, but he'd made sure she could. Kira stood in the kitchen for a long minute, her palms pressed flat on the counter, chest rising and falling too fast. She reached out again, slower this time, and reopened the laptop. The screen came back to life. Same folder. Same list of ugly truths. She scrolled past the others and noticed one she hadn't clicked yet. Run plan. Final. She paused. The folder's icon was different. A red mark sat on it. Last modified 3 days ago. She opened it. Inside were PDFs, notes, a scanned passport photo of her, one she never knew existed. Flight details, dates, cash withdrawals from accounts she didn't know Darren had. Chicago. Friday. That was 2 days from now. Her name was listed as a dependent, booked under a fake surname. Everything looked legitimate. The tickets were confirmed. First class. One PDF was titled, Exit Plan, Her Included. She opened it. The words were dry. Clinical. Use emotional weakness to control departure. Avoid confrontation. Involve only if trust can be preserved. If risk escalates. Sedate. Her mouth went dry. Sedate. He had plans. He wasn't just planning to run. He was planning to take her with him. Like luggage. Like property. She closed the file slowly, a burning behind her eyes. Her fingers curled into fists before she forced herself to relax them. The hum of the fridge buzzed behind her. The room was still too quiet. She stood up and walked across the kitchen. Her steps were stronger now. Not shaky. Not silent. Down the hallway, a light was on in the study. Renzo's silhouette sat behind a desk, head bent over a stack of papers. She stopped just short of the doorway. He was going to take me, she said aloud. Renzo didn't look surprised. He looked at her directly. I know, he replied. Kira took a step into the room. Why didn't you tell me? Renzo leaned back, gaze steady. Because I needed you to see it first. She stood in silence, breathing heavier now. Not from fear, from clarity. And just as she opened her mouth again, his phone buzzed once. He picked it up, read the message, then looked at her again. Someone else was helping him. The phone rang once, then stopped. Renzo didn't move. It buzzed again, longer this time. He answered with a flat tone. Yeah, the voice on the other end was clear, direct. He's in. Bag over his head, wrists bound. Collector got him 20 minutes ago. No trouble. Renzo leaned back in the chair. His knuckles tapped once on the desk. And, full confession, all verbal. Signed the docs, too. Man didn't even ask for a lawyer. He was begging before they got past the parking lot. Renzo didn't flinch. The files? Everything's sealed. We pulled all the surveillance from the apartment cams, cross-checked it with his burner messages. It's all backed up. Drives, cloud links. Chain of custody documented. Once it hits the inbox, no one can bury it. Renzo paused. Drop it with the U.S. attorney. No names, no trail. You know the drill. It's already on the way. You want him disappeared or exposed? Renzo's eyes shifted toward the hallway where Kira had last walked. Exposed. A beat of silence. Copy that. He ended the call and placed the phone face down on the desk. His fingers tapped once against the wood, then stopped. Outside the office, the house was still. Rain tapped the balcony windows, the kind of calm that rarely came before a storm. Not the weather kind, the kind that changed people. He stood, walked into the living room, and found Kira seated near the fireplace, arms wrapped around her knees. She wasn't crying. Her eyes were wide open, locked on the flames like she was trying to find answers in them. Renzo didn't speak. He stood across from her, hands in his pockets. She looked up. Something about her eyes had shifted. They were clearer now. Still hurt. Still healing, but not lost. Was that about him? She asked. Renzo nodded. He's gone? Renzo's tone was even, handled. Kira exhaled slowly. Her lips parted to say more, then stopped. She tried again. Thank you. He didn't nod. Didn't acknowledge it. Just stared into the fire next to her. Kira waited for him to say something. A nod. A quiet, "You're welcome," anything. But Renzo didn't move. He watched the fire, arms at his sides, still as stone. Like he'd done this before, helped someone survive and then disappeared before they could ask why. Kira dropped her gaze to the floor. "You don't want to talk about it," she said. Renzo blinked once. "I don't need gratitude. I wasn't offering a speech." Her voice was low but firm. I know you didn't have to do any of this. I'm not your family. I'm not connected to your world. You could have ignored the text." Still no reaction. She sighed. "You just don't care?" Renzo finally looked at her. Not cold, not sharp, just focused. "You think I did this because I care?" The words stung. She pulled her arms tighter around herself. Then Renzo continued. "I did this because no one else would." His tone didn't change. It didn't soften, but there was something under it, a layer of memory or pain that he didn't show in his face. "No one remembers women like you until it's too late." Kira didn't speak right away. Her lips parted like she wanted to challenge that, but she couldn't. Because it was true. Her sister hadn't believed her. Her friends stopped calling. The police asked if she had any bruises worth documenting. And Darren smiled through it all. She stared back at Renzo. Heart beat loud in her ears. "You've seen this before?" He didn't answer directly. "I've heard screams through walls no one else checked. I've cleaned up after monsters who wore perfect suits in court. The world forgets fast. Men like him survive off that." Kira's throat tightened. Renzo looked at the fire again. "I don't fix people," he said. "I just don't let them be erased." Kira didn't thank him again. She just nodded, slowly, because she was beginning to understand the rules of this man's world. And maybe, for the first time in her life, the silence between them didn't mean she owed anyone anything. The fire cracked softly. Kira's voice broke the silence a second time. "Why did you come?" Renzo didn't shift. He didn't take a breath like he needed to gather his thoughts. He just stood there, still grounded in the moment. "You don't know me." That message could have been a setup, could have been anyone. Why show up for something that wasn't your problem? This time, he moved. He pulled a chair from the far corner and sat down across from her, not too close, not far. The low light of the flames washed across the sharp angles of his face, but his eyes stayed dark and unreadable. "Because I've been on the other side of that call." Kira blinked. Renzo rested his elbows on his knees. Not that exact one, but close enough. "Someone once asked for help and didn't get it in time. I never forgot that sound, the one in their voice, that edge between begging and breaking." Kira studied him. "You lost someone?" Renzo's jaw tensed. "Yeah." He didn't say who. He didn't offer names or details. But she could feel the weight behind the word. The finality of it. "Was it a woman?" she asked quietly. He nodded once. The kind the world ignored, too. They sat with that for a moment. Kira's chest ached with a strange kind of pain. Grief for someone she didn't know, and gratitude for someone who still felt their echo. She pressed again, this time gently. "So, this isn't about me?" "It's not about pity," he said. "And it's not about guilt." He leaned back in the chair. "It's about not letting another monster think silence is protection." Kira exhaled. No speeches. No heroic claims. Just facts. She nodded slowly, the understanding settling in her chest. Then she asked something she hadn't planned to. Will you teach me how to protect myself too? Renzo's head lifted slightly, his eyes narrowing, not in doubt, but in consideration. You sure? She nodded. I don't want to freeze again. Renzo didn't give her a yes. Not right away. He stood up, walked to the window, and stared out like he was reading something in the trees. Kira stayed where she was, still seated, but her eyes stayed locked on him. Waiting, not pleading, waiting. He finally turned. You already figured out who I am. She didn't flinch. You're not just some quiet guy with a gun and a private apartment. Renzo cracked a small breath, almost a smile, but not quite. No. I know you're not a cop. You don't act like one. You don't check in. You don't follow rules. He tilted his head. And you think that's enough reason to trust me? I didn't say I trust you, she replied. Her voice was steady now. But I'm not afraid of you. That made him pause. It wasn't what he expected. He studied her for a long beat. No words. Just silence passing between them like a test she didn't know she was taking. Then he asked, Why do you want to learn? She looked down at her hands. They said I was dramatic, emotional, that I had no proof, that it was all in my head. Her voice was softer now. I don't want to wait for someone else to believe me next time. When she looked up again, her eyes were steady. I want to be ready for whatever comes next. Renzo nodded once. Get dressed. Bring nothing from your past life. We'll start with how to stand, then how to aim, then how to shoot. Kira swallowed, nerves kicking in, but not fear. Focus. Renzo opened a nearby drawer and set a keycard on the table. 10 minutes. Downstairs. Passenger side. Then he left the room. Kira stood, heart racing, but not from panic, from purpose. The garage door shut behind them with a quiet rumble. The second car waited inside, sleek, black, clean, no license plate on the front. Renzo opened the passenger side without a word. Kira climbed in, heart thumping. She wore all black now, borrowed sweats and a fitted jacket. Her hair was tied back, no makeup, no jewelry. For the first time in years, she looked like no one's girlfriend, just herself. The car moved through side streets and past wide gates until they turned down a gravel road lined with trees. Kira glanced at him as they pulled up to a windowless building tucked behind a slope of evergreens. You own this place? Renzo didn't answer. He pulled a card from his coat and scanned it against a metal panel. The door clicked open. Inside, the range was cold. Bright lights overhead. Walls padded. Targets already lined up at the far end. Renzo led her in, handed her a small earcase. No lectures, he said. No technical breakdowns. We start with how it feels. Kira nodded, fingers already tight with nerves. He opened a locked case and pulled out a compact firearm. This isn't about violence. It's about control, he said. When you know how to protect yourself, you stop needing to beg for protection. She stepped to the line. Her palms were sweating. He adjusted her grip from behind, not invasive, just enough to correct her stance. She flinched when he touched her elbow, and he backed off an inch. You lead. I follow. She nodded. Renzo stepped back, feet apart, knees soft. Don't lock them. She reset her stance. Now breathe. She did. Focus. The air went quiet. Pull. Her finger squeezed the trigger. A sharp bang echoed. The recoil kicked back, but she didn't drop the gun. She stared downrange, dead center, a small hole in the exact middle of the target. Kira blinked, then smiled. Renzo's voice came low behind her. You want another shot? She turned slightly, fire in her eyes. I want all of them. Renzo stepped beside her and loaded a second clip. This time, he said, we move while they shoot back. Kira wiped sweat from her forehead, adjusted her stance, and aimed again. The bullet struck 2 inches left of center. Still sharp, still solid, but not perfect. She frowned. Renzo watched from behind the glass, arms folded, silent. She hadn't flinched in 20 rounds. Hadn't asked for a break. Her breathing was steady. Her fingers didn't tremble anymore when she held the weapon. She was changing. But change didn't mean safety. Not yet. While she trained, Renzo's other focus lived inside a tablet screen. He stood at a table in the adjoining room, scrolling through data his tech team sent over. Names, shell companies, movement records, surveillance from the past 6 months. Darren had left more fingerprints than expected. One photo stopped him cold. Darren, 2 months ago, standing outside a warehouse owned by Cabrelli Holdings, talking to a man in a tan jacket with a thick scar under his eye, Carlo Moreau, one of the Cabrellis' trusted middlemen, a fixer who never showed up unless it mattered. Renzo leaned in. Another image. Same day. Same location. This time, Darren was handing over a flash drive. He tapped into the satellite feed archive. More dates. More meetups. Darren hadn't just been reckless. He'd been reporting. Every movement. Every dollar. Every change en route. Every client Renzo had shifted out of high-risk territory. Renzo's jaw tightened. The Cabrellas hadn't found a weakness in his organization, so they planted one. And she never knew. Kira had been nothing more than a door they left cracked, waiting to walk through. Renzo backed away from the screen. He turned toward the range, watching her reload. Arms firm, movements faster now. The weapon wasn't in her way anymore. But her name, her presence, they had eyes on her before that night. And if she had reached out, they knew. They knew she contacted someone, and they knew who would respond. Renzo paced the study while the files updated on his screen. Each page added another weight to the truth. Darren wasn't a man who snapped. He was a man who followed orders. Behind every so-called outburst was direction. Behind every camera hidden in Kira's apartment was strategy. The Cabrellas weren't interested in women like her, until they realized she lived across from one of Renzo's freight offices. Until she started dating a man they paid. Renzo's phone buzzed again. A new document came through. Payment schedule, C Holdings, Ruse Darren. 10,000 monthly. Flagged as consulting. Renzo stared at the transaction dates. Every payment lined up with key movements in his operation. Shipment changes, driver transfers, reroutes through Jersey. They used Darren to leak the moves before they happened. And it worked. 3 convoys had been intercepted in the past 6 months. No deaths, no noise, just losses written off as internal errors. But they hadn't been random. They'd been mapped. Kira had been in the middle of all of it, without knowing. She was never meant to survive Darren. Just keep him company until he burned her out. Disposable, forgettable. Renzo's knuckles tightened against the edge of the table. If she hadn't sent that text, he wouldn't have seen it. He wouldn't have known. He tapped a number on his second phone. A voice answered. Yeah? How many men knew about the South Rainier property? The voice hesitated. 5, including me. Renzo's tone dropped lower. Take it down to 3. Now. Understood. He hung up. Renzo's eyes stayed on the timeline on his screen. Darren's last payment hit 4 days before he was taken, meaning the Cabrellis still thought they had a working channel into Renzo's movement. That was the mistake. They didn't realize she'd turned. The deeper Renzo dug, the clearer the picture became. Darren hadn't stumbled into Kira's life. He'd been placed. Renzo scrolled through another string of messages pulled from Darren's encrypted backup. Short instructions. Shorter replies. Stay close. Keep pressure on her. Don't let her leave the apartment alone. Watch the building across the street. Every line hit harder than the last. They weren't tracking Kira. They were tracking him. Kira was the doorway. Her apartment window faced Renzo's distribution hub. Her schedule gave them predictable vantage points. Darren kept her isolated because the Cabrellas needed her under control. Not for her sake. For data. Every argument Darren picked, every bruise he left, every rule he forced on her. It wasn't random rage. It was discipline. It was ownership. She wasn't meant to be a partner. She was an anchor. Renzo dragged a hand over his jaw, his breath steady but weighted. He'd seen a lot growing up, but this strategy wasn't brutal. It was calculated. They weaponized someone who trusted too easily. Someone who wanted love to mean safety. Someone who never deserved to be dragged into a war she didn't know existed. He switched screens. More lists, device tracking logs, times her lights turned on, times Darren left the apartment to report, times she opened or closed her windows. The Cabrellas had been watching her routines like a study, like someone gathering intel. And it didn't stop there. Patterns showed they checked her phone activity for months, which meant they saw when she used the burner number. They saw the call that went to the wrong place. They saw the exact minute she asked for help, and they saw who responded. Renzo's breathing slowed. He looked up through the glass at Kira on the range. She was steady now, stronger, focusing on her next shot like nothing else existed. The truth twisted through him. She had no idea how deep she'd been dragged, no idea she'd been used to get to him, and no idea that by reaching out, she had revealed herself to the people who never wanted her to survive. Renzo set the tablet down and pressed both hands on the desk. His mind didn't race, he wasn't the type to panic, but everything inside him tightened with a clear, sharp truth. If Kira reached out that night, if she texted for help, if she used the one burner number Darren never checked, the Cabrellas saw it. They had access to Darren's data logs. They monitored everything he sent in and out. The burner number wasn't one they recognized, but the activity spike would have caught their system's attention, which meant they knew she contacted someone, which meant they were already trying to figure out who answered. Renzo turned toward the range. Through the glass, he watched Kira lift the firearm again, jaw tight, posture corrected just like he taught her. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. Her stance was clean, grounded, almost confident. She didn't see the danger pulling threads around her life. She didn't know she'd been marked the moment she broke the cycle and asked for help. She didn't know the Cabrellas weren't the type to let loose ends walk away. Renzo stepped out of the study and walked down the hallway toward the training room. The echo of his footsteps bounced off the walls, steady and controlled. Inside the range, Kira lowered the gun when she noticed his reflection in the glass. "You okay?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Kira," he said quietly. She faced him fully. "There's something I need to tell you." Her posture straightened. Renzo walked until he stood in front of her. He didn't touch her. He didn't raise his voice. But the words were heavy. "The people Darren worked for, they know you reached out." Her breath hitched. "What does that mean?" "It means they won't let this end clean." Kira looked at him, heart thumping hard enough to feel in her hands. "But I won't let them reach you," Renzo added. It wasn't reassurance. It was a promise. But outside the underground building, a shadow passed near the tree line, someone watching the structure from a distance. Night settled in thick and heavy. The sky over South Rainier was quiet. Too quiet. No wind, no traffic. Just the hum of the street lamp flickering outside the estate. Inside, Kira slept for the first time on the right side of the bed, like she was no longer afraid of being too close to the door. Her breathing had settled. The bruises had faded. Her grip was stronger. Her posture sharper. Renzo stood at the balcony upstairs, eyes locked on the front gate. A guard patrolled below, same route, same timing. He trusted the man. Had known him since he was 15. But trust didn't mean safe. At 2:41 a.m., headlights appeared at the far end of the street. Too fast, too close, too quiet. Renzo's hand went to his side. The car didn't slow. It didn't honk. It didn't signal. The windows rolled down before the tires even stopped spinning. 3 loud cracks tore through the night. Bullets hit the front of the house, one to the door, one to the wall, one through the front gate post. The guard ducked low behind the steps, yelling into his comms. Renzo was already moving. The car peeled off before anyone could get a plate. Kira shot up from bed, gasping, stumbling toward the hallway as Renzo met her halfway. She looked at him, wide-eyed, heart pounding. "They know where I am." Renzo didn't nod, didn't blink. He walked past her, down the stairs, opened the front door, and saw the message pinned to the wood with a switchblade. One scrap of paper. 3 words, scrawled in red. She's marked. Again, his jaw locked tight. No signature, no crest, but the Cabrelli silence was louder than ink. Kira stepped beside him, breath still shaky. Renzo didn't look at her. He didn't want her to see the thought forming. They hadn't come for him. They'd come for her. And next time, they wouldn't leave a note. This just got personal. If you're feeling every twist, hit that like button and drop a comment. What would you do if danger lived in your phone? They left before sunrise. No warning. No goodbyes. Just a duffel bag, a secure car, and Renzo in the front seat with eyes fixed on the road. No escort this time. No trail to follow. Only silence broken by the occasional voice in his earpiece. Kira didn't ask where they were going. He hadn't said. They drove for over an hour, past farmland, through 2 private gates, down a gravel path swallowed by trees. The air grew colder, the road narrower, then the trees broke. Ahead, nestled in a valley of green and stone, stood a house unlike anything she expected. Wide and low, built from dark wood and glass. It looked like it had grown from the mountain itself. No security cameras, no guard station, no logos, no tech flashing in corners, just space and quiet. Renzo parked the car himself. Kira stepped out slowly, looking around. It didn't feel like a safe house. It felt like a home someone had stopped using. He didn't lead her inside. He stood at the edge of the drive, staring at the roofline like he was measuring something in his mind. She finally broke the silence. "This is yours?" His voice came after a pause. "Yeah. Anyone know about it?" "2 people. One of them's dead." Kira turned to him. "So, why bring me here?" He looked at her fully now. "Because this is the one place no one watches." He stepped toward the front door, unlocked it with a small brass key, and let her walk in first. The house inside was simple, clean, but lived in. Worn couches, bookshelves lined with texts in multiple languages. No trophies, no signs of wealth, but nothing was cheap. The kitchen had dishes already stacked in the sink. Renzo dropped the keys on the counter. She looked around and whispered more to herself than him. "This doesn't look like somewhere you hide people," he answered without turning. "I'm not hiding you." Kira stepped farther inside, letting the air settle around her. It smelled faintly like cedar ash and something older, like time had passed without being disturbed. She traced her fingers along a thick wooden table by the window. No dust, no clutter, but lived in. Renzo poured water into a glass and slid it her way without asking. She didn't drink yet. She just watched him. "You didn't answer my question." He looked at her over his shoulder. "Which one? Why here?" He leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "You weren't a mistake." Kira frowned. "I didn't say I was." "You think it," he replied. "Every time you look over your shoulder. Every time you apologize before you speak." Her lips parted, but no words came out. "They think you were a mistake," he said. "They think letting you live was a crack in the plan. They think you were supposed to fold when he turned on you." She lowered her eyes to the floor. Renzo stepped forward, slow. "You were a loose end to them, but you reached out. And that single move burned their map." Kira looked back up. His voice stayed steady. "You were never the mistake. You were the disruption." For a moment, she didn't know what to say. Then quietly, "So now I'm a threat." He nodded. "You always were. They just didn't see it until too late." She crossed her arms, not from fear, but because her chest felt tight with something unfamiliar. Maybe pride, maybe clarity, maybe both. Renzo pushed off the counter. "You don't have to stay long," he said. "Just long enough to breathe without watching every door." Kira walked toward the windows, gazing out into the stretch of green that rolled for miles. No cameras, none that record. She tilted her head slightly. "So you trust the silence?" "I don't trust anything," he said. "But this place, this is mine. And no one gets in unless I let them." Kira nodded once, her reflection in the glass layered over the trees. She wasn't hiding. She was beginning to understand who she was when no one was looking. Kira moved through the hallway, fingertips brushing the textured walls. This place felt different from the apartments Renzo used for business. Less guarded, less sharp. The quiet wasn't heavy here. It felt personal. She stopped at an open doorway. Inside was a room that looked untouched for years. A bed made neatly. A desk pushed against the wall. A baseball glove on the shelf, worn at the edges. And framed photos lined up in a row. She stepped closer. One showed Renzo younger by at least 10 years, sitting beside a boy a little shorter than him. Same eyes, same grin, same stubborn tilt of the chin. Another photo showed the two of them standing on a dock, each holding a fish. Renzo's smile was nothing like the controlled half-curve she'd seen around him now. It was wide, real. Kira swallowed. That was Matteo. She turned. Renzo stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on the photos. Not her. Your brother, she said. Yeah. She looked back at the picture. What happened to him? Renzo stepped into the room but didn't touch anything. He kept his gaze steady. He died because someone waited too long to step in. Kira didn't move. He was being pushed around by a crew in the old neighborhood. They kept making threats. I didn't take it serious enough. His jaw tightened. One night he called. I told him I'd be there in 10 minutes. Kira felt the weight of the silence that followed. I got there in 17. The words hit like a drop in an empty room. He breathed out, slow. After that, I made a promise. I don't let fear run my life, and I don't let people scream for help alone. Kira lowered her eyes to the photo again. She didn't know Matteo, but she felt him. And she understood why Renzo moved the way he moved, why he showed up, why he stepped through her door without hesitation. She turned to him. You brought me here because of him? No, Renzo said, because you asked for help, and I didn't want another call I regret. She held his gaze. I'm not hiding here, she said quietly. You don't have to. The house had no alarms, but Kira could feel the perimeter anyway. Not through fences, through him. Renzo moved like the place answered to him. Every time he walked a hallway or stepped outside, the air shifted. He didn't pace. He observed, like nothing could slip past his line of sight. But inside the walls, the quiet started changing shape. They ate dinner at the same table each night. No music, no distractions, just food and breathing and small observations exchanged in silence. He cooked once, didn't ask if she liked it. She didn't offer the compliment, but she ate it all. Kira had started sleeping through the night again, not from comfort, from knowing he was near and no one could get past him. But tonight was different. The fire was low in the living room. She sat on one side of the couch, legs curled under her. Renzo sat across, boots still on, a file open in his hand but untouched. The quiet felt heavier tonight, but not in a bad way. It felt full. She watched him. The way the light caught the scar on his neck, the tension always present. In his shoulders, the way he didn't blink too much but never stared too hard. He wasn't trying to figure her out. He already had. She reached out slowly, her hand resting on the edge of the couch cushion beside him. Her fingers moved toward his hand. She hesitated for half a second, then laid her hand on his. Warm, still. Renzo didn't pull away, didn't shift, didn't stiffen. His thumb barely moved, brushing against her knuckles once. Then again. She didn't speak for a long time. Then she whispered, barely audible, I'm not scared of you. Renzo's hand didn't leave hers, and for the first time since she'd met him, his shoulders relaxed. The moon hung low that night, casting a pale glow over the hills beyond the estate. Inside, the fireplace dimmed to glowing embers. Kira had fallen asleep on the couch, her hand still near where Renzo sat. He watched her for a few seconds longer, then rose without sound and stepped into the hallway. His eyes scanned the entryway, the back windows, the tree line through the kitchen glass. Still, too still. Renzo moved to the control panel in the back room, an old analog switchboard system, nothing digital, nothing traceable. Only 4 perimeter lines, all tied to vibration sensors beneath the brush. He flipped a toggle. Line 2, east lower slope, was triggered. A beat passed. Then again. Once. Twice. Someone was moving too close. Renzo didn't hesitate. He slipped into the hallway closet, pulled a rifle from behind a false panel, and loaded a single round with smooth, practiced motion. He didn't raise alarms, didn't turn on any lights. He stepped outside through the utility door barefoot, the cold stone biting under his steps. He moved fast and low along the side trail, rifle tucked tight, eyes sharp in the dark. Halfway down the slope he saw it, a shadow, about 6 foot, standing too close to the fence, facing the wrong direction. No flashlight, no sound, watching the house, not the woods. Renzo didn't speak. He stepped to the left, adjusting his angle. The wind shifted. The shadow turned its head and ran. Renzo didn't follow, not all the way. He lowered the rifle slowly and stepped toward where the intruder had stood. A single set of footprints in the dirt, and something left behind. A matchbox from a downtown cigar lounge, the same one Darren used to frequent. He picked it up. Inside was a folded note, 4 words. "You let her talk." Renzo turned back toward the house, jaw set. They'd found her again, but this time they weren't leaving notes on doors. They were testing how close they could get before he stopped watching. The next morning, Renzo didn't speak much. He made breakfast with quiet hands, flipping eggs, slicing into a loaf of bread with the same focus he used when cleaning weapons. Kira noticed how his shoulders stayed tighter than usual, how his gaze drifted toward the windows more often. He was thinking, planning, or maybe waiting. After she cleared her plate, he nodded once toward the hallway. "Stay inside." She wanted to ask why, but something about his tone told her now wasn't the time. 20 minutes later, 2 cars arrived without headlights, dark gray, tinted windows, no plates. Renzo met them outside. She watched from the upstairs window, just barely peeking through the curtain. 3 men stepped out. One of them, Devon, she recognized. He was the one who brought her tea the night she first arrived. Tall, quiet, always nodded once before walking away. Renzo didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He simply stood in front of Devon and showed him the matchbox. Then he said something Kira couldn't hear. Devon's face drained of color. Renzo took a single step forward. Devon flinched. Then he dropped to one knee, murmuring something quickly, like an apology that wouldn't help. Renzo raised a hand. The 2 other men grabbed Devon's arms and hauled him toward the tree line. No shouts, no struggle, no second chance. Kira didn't look away. Minutes later, the men returned without him. Renzo followed behind, wiping his hands with a cloth. He didn't say a word as he came back inside. Kira stood near the stairs, frozen. He didn't explain. He didn't need to. He took off his coat, hung it by the door, and looked at her with the same quiet he always carried. Only now it felt heavier. Something had broken. Not trust. Renzo didn't trust many people to begin with. But routine, that silence that once protected them, had just cracked. And now Kira couldn't unsee what it looked like when loyalty was tested and crushed. Renzo didn't speak about Devon after that morning. He didn't reference the betrayal, didn't bring it up in passing, didn't mention his name again. But the message traveled. By midday, the guards on rotation adjusted their routes. No one asked questions. The man who handled communications reran every security protocol, twice. Kitchen staff showed up early, cleared out fast, and didn't linger. No one asked where Devon went. No one dared. Kira noticed it all. She didn't ask either. But she watched Renzo more closely now. The way his movements stayed calm, but his eyes held more weight. The kind of weight that builds when people you feed and pay turn around and offer your location to your enemies. He didn't look angry. He looked like he'd filed something away, something permanent. Later that day, Renzo checked the grounds himself. Alone. He walked the lower slope, surveyed the eastern perimeter, checked the line where Devon had stood the night before. When he returned, he washed his hands slowly and didn't speak for over an hour. Kira found him on the back deck near sundown. The wind pushed soft through the trees. He sat in a chair made of thick wood, carved clean, edges worn smooth from time. She sat across from him. After a long pause, she finally asked, "Did you know him well?" Renzo didn't answer right away. "Devon was with us for 8 years. Came from my cousin's side. Quiet, loyal, or so we thought." Kira's hands tightened around the cup she held. "He knew who I was to you?" she asked. "He knew you were under this roof," Renzo replied. She nodded slowly. He added, "That's all the Cabrellas needed." Silence followed, but not the kind that pushed them apart. It was the kind that marked a shift, where truth had no softness left to give. Whatever happened next, Renzo had already decided one thing: no more assumptions, no more chances. Kira didn't turn away from Renzo after what she saw. She didn't shrink back. She didn't hide in her room. Instead, she stayed close. That night, while he checked the locks and secured the back doors, she followed him. Through the house at a careful distance, not out of fear, but out of something deeper. Understanding, maybe, or the beginning of it. He paused at the laundry room door when he noticed her behind him. "You should rest," he said. "I'm fine. You didn't sleep much." "Neither did you." He exhaled once, more of a sigh than anything else, and continued down the hall. She stayed behind him until he settled in the kitchen with a glass of water. She stepped to the opposite side of the island. What made Devon turn? Renzo's eyes lifted. She didn't flinch. He answered, "Money, promise of protection. Maybe greed, maybe fear. Doesn't matter. Does it bother you?" she asked. He raised a brow. The betrayal. He leaned on the counter, hands pressed flat on the surface. His voice stayed even. "In my world, betrayal is common. But when it comes from someone who grew up around you, who ate at your table, it hits different." She nodded. "You ever think of walking away from it?" He didn't blink. "Every day. But there are things in my life I don't get to step away from. Not after what happened to my brother. Not after the battles that came with taking over. Power isn't a trophy. It's a debt." Kira watched his face shift, subtle lines of pain around his eyes that he didn't try to hide tonight. "And the pain?" she asked gently. "Where do you keep all of it?" He met her eyes for a long beat. "Everywhere," he said. No cinematic pause, no dramatic tone. Just truth, simple and sharp. Kira swallowed, her throat warm, her heart steady in her chest. She stepped closer, not enough to touch, but enough to show she wasn't afraid of the truth he carried. She didn't cry, not for him, not for herself, but for the life she left behind. She felt a quiet shift inside her. She wasn't the same woman who sent that text, and Renzo wasn't the same man who read it. The kitchen lights were dim, casting a soft glow over the space. Kira leaned against the island while Renzo stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the trees sway in the distance. She broke the silence. What was she like? "Your mother?" Renzo didn't answer right away. His gaze stayed on the dark outside, but his voice came low. She didn't talk much, but she saw everything. He turned slowly, walking to the counter, pouring water from a ceramic jug into a glass. "She raised us after my father disappeared. 2 boys, 1 paycheck, no help, no apologies." Kira listened without interrupting. She used to say, "Power's not about money. It's about not asking twice for something that's yours." He took a sip, eyes distant. She didn't beg, not once. Not even when the lights were out or the food ran out. "What happened to her?" Kira asked. "She made it to 62, never left the neighborhood, still cooked for strangers, still walked to church on Sundays." His tone shifted, soft but guarded. "She was the reason I built what I built. Not for status, for control. She spent her life surviving. I wanted to spend mine making sure I never had to." Kira stepped closer. "You miss her?" Renzo looked at her fully now. Every day, they stood like that for a long moment. 2 people shaped by the weight of loss and the pull of purpose. Kira reached for his hand, not rushed, not seeking comfort. Her fingers grazed the scar on his jaw, the one that always caught the light when he turned. She leaned in and kissed it. Soft, slow, her voice barely above a whisper. "This one, you shouldn't carry alone." Renzo didn't step back. He didn't close his eyes. He simply breathed in once, steady, like her words had peeled something back he hadn't let anyone touch, not in years. The house settled into quiet again after midnight. The fireplace burned low. The wind outside had softened, brushing the windows like a whisper. Kira lay on the far side of the bed, eyes open, thinking, not afraid, not overwhelmed, just aware. Everything inside her had shifted in the last few weeks. The girl who once whispered apologies through locked doors didn't exist anymore. The woman who stood beside Renzo now knew how to fire a weapon, how to read silence, how to look danger in the face without folding. But she still didn't sleep deeply. Not yet. At some point past 1 a.m., she finally closed her eyes. When she woke again, the sun had barely touched the windows. The room was warm, undisturbed. Her clothes were still folded neatly on the chair. The bathroom door was cracked, the steam from the early morning shower already faded. She stretched and sat up. That's when she saw it. A white envelope. It sat on her pillow. Crisp, clean, no stamp, no handwriting on the outside. Her stomach dropped. She looked toward the door. It was still locked from the inside. She hadn't heard anything. No creak, no knock, no whisper of movement. Her hand trembled slightly as she picked it up and turned it over. One red mark on the back, a thumbprint. Inside was a single folded note. 5 words. Run or die. We warned you. That was it. No signature, no threats, no bluff. But the weight behind it cut through her chest like ice. Kira stood slowly, envelope still in hand, and moved to the hallway. Her steps were quiet but fast. Renzo was already downstairs. He turned the moment he saw her face. She held up the note without a word. His expression didn't change. But his next move was immediate. He pulled out his phone and made one call. Lock the grounds. Nobody leaves. Nobody enters. He ended the call and looked back at her. They got too close again, he said. Her voice cracked, but only once. They were inside. Renzo stood at the head of the long table in his private war room. No screens, no wires, just paper, maps, and silence. 3 of his men sat across from him, waiting for direction. One shifted nervously in his seat. The others sat still, watching the lines Renzo drew across the map with a red grease pencil. They got inside, he said, voice low. No one spoke. They're testing how close they can get before I strike back. He pointed to 3 points circled on the map. Cabrelli-owned front businesses, all near South Rainier. 1 shipping yard, 1 warehouse, 1 cafe that stayed open too late and too quiet. Renzo leaned forward. We hit them tonight. No announcements, no distractions, quiet and fast. You know the drill. The men nodded. Start with the warehouse, Renzo added. Then the cafe. I want eyes on every face that steps out after midnight. One of the men asked, and the bait? Renzo didn't answer. Not yet. He closed the folder, slid it down the table. This is a message, he said. They think they can walk into my home, touch my people, leave paper on my pillow. He looked up. We're done waiting. The men stood and left without another word. The door shut behind them. Renzo stayed in place, knuckles pressed against the edge of the table, heart steady. He was done holding back. Done waiting for them to get bold enough to strike. This time, he was moving first. Upstairs, Kira watched through the hallway window as the cars pulled out one by one. Her arms were crossed, eyes sharper now than they'd ever been. She knew what that room was, what those men meant. She didn't need to be told he was going after them. She just didn't know yet if he planned to leave her behind again. And tonight, that was no longer something she'd allow. Renzo stepped back into the hallway, hands dusted with red ink from the map room. He stopped short when he saw her waiting. Kira blocked the hallway, arms folded across her chest, her gaze leveled. I know you're planning something, she said, voice calm. Don't deny it. He didn't. You shouldn't be involved, Renzo replied. This isn't your weight to carry. Her voice didn't rise. It became mine the moment they used me. He looked away, jaw clenched. I'm not a thing you keep safe in a box, she added. I'm a woman who lived with a man who smiled at me and planned to sell me behind closed doors. You think I don't want blood? You want revenge, he said. That's not the same as surviving it. I want choice, she fired back, and I want to fight for it. not sit in some hidden room while you bleed for me." Renzo stepped closer. "You don't understand how brutal—" "I've felt it," she interrupted, eyes shining. "On my neck, in my bones, every bruise he left." "Don't talk to me about brutality." Silence stretched. She stepped forward. "You keep saying I'm not weak. Prove you believe it. Fight with me, not for me." That broke something in him. He looked at her. Not as the woman he rescued. Not as the woman who flinched at his shadow, but as the one now challenging his world. Renzo exhaled slowly. "Then we bait the mole," he said. "But we do it my way." She nodded once. "Agreed. Starting now, you don't go anywhere without me or someone I assign. No exceptions." Her voice softened. "And you don't leave me behind when it matters." Deal struck. Two different scars. One united goal. They didn't hug. They didn't need to. She walked past him, straight-backed, steady. And for the first time, Renzo didn't feel like he was leading her. He felt like he was walking beside her. Renzo stood in the center of the glass room, hands behind his back, while Kira stepped forward in a simple black sweater and jeans. "I'll walk the market trail," she said, "like before. Same route Darren used to take me down, same cafe, same bench." It was bold, but she meant it. Renzo's men exchanged glances. No one dared question her. Renzo turned. "The plan stays tight. One visual contact, one wireless bug. No deviation. I want eyes on every rooftop," he added to his men. "If anyone breathes too close to her, we shut it down." Kira pulled her hair into a knot. Her hand didn't tremble. Renzo's fingers brushed hers as he passed her a slim audio piece. "This stays on," he said. "Always." She met his gaze. "And if they take the bait, we end it." The market looked the same. Bright awnings, children with balloons, a fresh fruit, but everything inside her had changed. Kira sat on the same worn bench Darren always made her wait on. She wore the same jacket she had on the day he made her watch him cut a deal for information. This time she wasn't looking down. This time she stared straight ahead. A man walked by. Then another. One looked too long. Another stopped, then turned around. Renzo's voice crackled in her ear. "Yellow jacket. Possible contact." Kira didn't flinch. The man in yellow sat beside her. His hands were clean. Smile, rehearsed. "You're braver than they said." She said nothing. "Darren told me you'd fold fast." Still, nothing. He slid a photo onto the bench between them. It was of Renzo. The man leaned close. "You're going to help us break him." And then, just as calmly, he stood and walked. Kira exhaled. One slow breath. "Contact made," she whispered. Renzo's voice, "We follow. Stay still." But as the man disappeared around the corner, two more figures appeared. And one of them looked straight into her soul. They weren't there to talk. Kira stayed frozen on the bench as the two men approached. They didn't rush. They moved with the slow confidence of people who expected fear to take over before they even spoke. Renzo's voice came through her earpiece again, tighter this time. "Two incoming. Stay seated." She didn't move. The taller man stopped right in front of her, close enough that she smelled cigar smoke on his jacket. His hair was slicked back, and his eyes carried the kind of coldness that didn't require shouting to scare someone. "So, this is the girl," he muttered. The other one chuckled low. "Darren said she'd break easy." Kira met their eyes without blinking. The tall one leaned over her. "You're going to come with us. Quiet. Head down. No noise." She didn't answer. He reached for her arm. "Try it," a voice said behind them. Renzo stepped out from the shadow of the vendor stand. No hesitation, no fear. Three of his men flanked him. But the Cabrelli crew had doubled their numbers. More shadows stepped out from between cars, from behind fruit crates, from alley corners. 5 on Renzo's side, 9 on theirs. The tall man smirked. "You're outnumbered, Calderi." Renzo didn't break eye contact. "Numbers don't matter if the first one falls fast." The man laughed. "You're protecting her, like she's family." Renzo took one step forward. "Touch her again, and you'll understand what family means to me." The Cabrelli men tightened their stance. A woman pushing a stroller glanced over, felt the tension, and hurried away. Vendors quietly slid behind their stands. Everyone nearby sensed something heavy in the air. The tall man tipped his chin. "You can't win this." Renzo gave a small, deadly smile. "I don't need to win the street. I need to win the moment." He reached into his coat. Hands tightened on weapons across both sides. Kira's pulse spiked. Renzo didn't pull a gun. He pulled a signal flare trigger. In one bright flash of red, the entire block lit up. Renzo's reinforcements emerged from the rooftops. The Cabrelli men realized too late they weren't outnumbering him as much as they thought. But the chaos hit fast, and in the scramble, someone grabbed Kira from behind. Her breath caught, and the world spun. Renzo turned at the sound of her gasp. But Kira was already gone. The smoke from the flare muddied everything. His men moved fast, grabbing the Cabrelli shooters as planned. But something was wrong. The target was the girl, always had been, and he knew it the moment the bench where she sat was empty. "Where is she?" He barked into his comm. No answer. He sprinted across the street, shoulder-checking a man against a wall. Blood streaked down the side of his own arm, but he didn't stop. Kira. He spotted her phone on the ground. The screen cracked, still open on the fake meeting text she'd sent as bait. A setup. Renzo cursed under his breath. Then he saw it. Tire tracks. A dark van at the alley exit, door still swinging. "Move!" he shouted. He chased, leaping over crates and ducking under a falling banner. Two of his guards followed. The van was turning at the far corner, and just before it disappeared, he saw her, pressed against the glass. Her eyes locked with his. 1 second, that was all he had. Then the van was gone. His feet slammed to a stop in the middle of the road, breath ragged, fury rising. The Cabrelli crew had planned this deeper than he thought. He looked at his men. "Find every safe house on their list. Don't wait." They nodded and spread out. But Renzo stood still. The street fell quiet again. In his hand, her phone buzzed once. Unknown number. A message blinked across the screen. "You took our asset. Now we've taken yours. You have 48 hours. He crushed the phone in his hand. Not because he was angry, because if they thought Kira was his weakness, they hadn't met the man she woke up in him. The moment the warehouse door slammed shut behind that van, something cracked in Renzo Calderi. Not the measured, precise man his enemies feared. Not the shadowy figure that built his empire with patience and discipline. No, what rose inside him now had no name, only instinct. He tossed the destroyed phone into the back seat, jumped into the driver's seat, and peeled out onto the street before his men caught up. His voice ripped through the comms. "Lock every road. No one leaves this city. Every tunnel, every back route, block it. And someone find the plate on that van." The streets blurred past. Red lights were ignored. Sirens flashed in the distance, but none dared follow him. This was his city, and when Renzo was hunting, the streets knew to stay silent. His jaw clenched. He hadn't protected her. He should have known. His mind replayed the seconds. She vanished, her eyes meeting his, the scream she never got to voice. He slammed his hand against the steering wheel. She had trusted him, and they took her. A car swerved beside him. His men, 2 SUVs, fell in line. "Any sign?" he snapped. "Nothing yet." "Then dig deeper." He took a hard turn off Bridgeway Avenue, cutting down a service road only those who ran the city knew about. His tires screeched against the concrete. He reached the dockyards in under 4 minutes. Old Cabrelli ground, deserted now but filled with old ghosts. He parked, called one name, Nico. The reply came fast. "Yes, boss. You know who to ask. If anyone knows where they'd keep a girl like her, it's the man who once sold bodies in crates." A pause. "Then I'm on it." Renzo stepped out of the car. The air was cold, but not as cold as the fire in his chest. He looked toward the skyline. The Cabrellis thought they'd broken him. They didn't know he hadn't started yet. Renzo hadn't blinked in 2 hours. The room was dark, except for the screens flickering in front of him. Street cameras, warehouse feeds, traffic control hacks. He had everything tapped. Every second that passed without Kira triggered something inside him, something he hadn't let loose since his brother died. He slammed his fist down, sending a full ceramic ashtray flying. No one in the room moved. Start from the train station. His voice was low, sharp. Follow anyone tied to Cabrelli. Old contacts, paid cops, dead snitches. I want eyes everywhere. They scattered. He didn't chase emotions. He burned through them. But tonight, his hands were shaking. On his desk sat the small piece of paper she left behind, her handwriting. Her scent still lingered on his jacket. She had been right beside him. Now she was gone. The door cracked open. Rico entered, nodding. We pulled street drone footage. One led. Old butcher shop off South Halden. No trucks, no guards posted. But activity started an hour ago. Unusual for a closed-down place. Renzo didn't wait. He was out the door, jacket flung across his shoulder, his steps fast and full of pressure. 2 black SUVs peeled out into the night. No headlights, no talking. Each man inside knew this wasn't cleanup. This was recovery. Halfway there, Renzo tapped his earpiece. No perimeter. We go in hard. If they lay a hand on her... He didn't finish. He didn't need to. The warehouse stood like a grave, buried in shadow. Chain link fence, half torn. One overhead light flickering. But Renzo saw the signs. Fresh tire tracks, faint heat signals. He raised his hand. His men spread out like wolves. Inside, it was colder than expected. A rusted chair, stained mattress, and old liquor bottles suggested it had been used before. But he didn't see Kira. He saw the man guarding the stairwell. Renzo didn't hesitate. The man reached for his gun. Too late. Renzo tackled him straight into the wall, gun pressed under the chin. One crack. One body down. A scream. It wasn't hers. Another man fell from above. Renzo shot upward blindly, driving 2 of his men forward. They disappeared into the stairwell, footsteps echoing. "Basement," Rico shouted through the comm. "She's down there." Renzo didn't blink. He moved like nothing could stop him. He reached the lower hall. Empty. A guard was bound in duct tape. Eyes wide. Mouth gagged. A burner phone lay nearby, still unlocked. He picked it up. A message played. Kira's voice. "Tell your boss I'm not hiding anymore." He froze. Behind him, tires screeched. His car had returned. He rushed out, just as the back door opened. Kira stepped out, blood on her sleeve, hair wild, her shirt torn near the collar. But she stood tall, her eyes locked onto his. She walked straight to him. No fear, no apology. "Told you I'd stop being the victim," she said. Then she passed out in his arms. The city exhaled. No shootouts, no trails of fire. Just a slow fade of tension so quiet it felt staged. Renzo didn't believe peace. He studied it. Each day, one of his men ran scans across the networks. Another swept the streets for whispers. A third trailed a courier known to the Cabrellis, waiting for a coded drop. But nothing came. Kira moved again, this time not under orders. She left the temporary safe house behind and chose a quiet apartment, in a building with no view, no camera system, and no easy entry. Just the way she liked it now. She walked different. Shoulders back, eyes forward. Her body still held the trauma, but her voice, when it came, was firm. Her phone stayed on airplane mode most days. But her hands stayed busy. She returned to design, not for work, for herself. She erased every sketch that looked like it was meant to please someone else. She sat in silence for hours, redrawing the woman she saw in the mirror now. Once, she caught Renzo watching from the alley across the street, just standing by a dumpster, like some man waiting on a deal. He never texted, never waved. But she knew. He was still guarding her. She didn't wave back, but she smiled, a little, and went inside. The living room doubled as her workshop. Bolts of raw fabric lined the wall. A rusted sewing machine churned through the night. No more dresses meant for silent parties. No soft lines designed to flatter others. Now, her sketches had edge, power, color that struck the page like warning signs. She didn't make anything to wear out. She made armor, in fabric. One morning, Renzo dropped off a parcel. No name, no note, just left on her doorstep and gone before she opened the door. Inside, fabric, Italian, one of a kind, expensive. She recognized it from a showroom she once visited with Darren, where she wasn't allowed to touch. She made a jacket with it. Cropped, strong, fire red. She wore it that night, walking into the corner diner like she had money in her name, and a man behind her she didn't need. And he was there, in the corner, Renzo, eating alone. His eyes caught hers. No words, but he noticed the jacket. She saw his nod. He never entered her space unless she asked. She never asked. But he was always near. Sometimes a black car across the street. Other times a figure on the fire escape, smoking, silent. At night she left the window cracked, a small sign. He never climbed up, but she knew he saw it. One morning she walked to the market. A man brushed too close. She turned quick, body low, sharp, just like Renzo taught. It wasn't him, but she saw Renzo watching from behind a streetlight. Still there. Still her shadow. When she turned around again, he was gone. Later he left a note. Folded, simple, slid under her door. You saw him before he saw you. Good. That was all he wrote. But she held it all day like it was a badge. She was drawing. Music low. Window open. The screen lit up. Unknown number. She didn't move. She hadn't used that number in weeks. Only Renzo had it. And he didn't text. She stared. Then the message appeared. You were supposed to stay silent. This doesn't end with one arrest. Her body didn't flinch. Her hand didn't shake. She lowered the pencil, closed her sketch pad, stood. She walked calmly to the door, opened it. No one there, but down the block, across the street behind a rusted SUV, Renzo stood waiting, like he knew. She didn't speak. She walked straight to him, held out her phone. He read the message, didn't blink. He didn't answer, not at first. Then he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a battered black burner phone, the same model she'd texted that night, the same phone that saved her life. He handed it to her. You want to run? Her eyes didn't flinch. Her voice didn't break. No, she said. I want to answer. They stood together in the dark, wind moving past, a second chance wrapped in a question. What would you do if danger called twice, once to break you and once to test your strength? If this story had you locked in, hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, Tales of Mafia Lovers, for more powerful tales, and drop a comment. Your voice keeps these stories alive.